Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Lab. I'm Brian. I'm here with Ian and Matthew Friedman, and they're getting their videos up and running. Let's get Ian up here. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So we are good. It is Sunday, week 6. I am having to do a little bit of traveling this week, so I'm broadcasting from a Starbucks in a country like a country store thing. So that's going to be fun. Anyway, let's jump right into this and talk about some of the indies. Ian, let's start with the game that everyone, I guess, is really wanting to know about, which is the New Orleans Saints game in the Superdome facing the Lions. What's going on with some of their players? Was hobbled a little bit last week, but what's going on?
Talking about the Saints, we got Willie Snead back for the first time this season. Shouldn't have our expectations super high. He's already come out himself this week and said that he's expected to kind of be limited going back into things with his hamstring still an issue. So we'll still be seeing plenty of Brandon Coleman in the slot as well. With that, obviously we have this new backfield with AP gone. AP was only getting a few touches a game anyway, so we shouldn't expect a complete overhaul, but it's great to finally have some clarity in that situation. Currently, we have both Kamara and Ingram pretty high, but kind of expectation for now is that Ingram's going to mostly be the early down running back, with Kamara being more the third down guy.
Yeah, Matt, what are your thoughts on this game? I know that you had been talking earlier in the week about some alignment, first line movement, seeing this morning sort of in the Vegas markets. I don't know, dictate your thoughts game now that getting close to lock.
The Action Network. Some sharp money has come in to push the over to 51.5. So there is some definite sharp bullishness on this game. That said, there is also some reverse line movement toward the Saints and going against the Lions. Of course, there's no Kenny Golladay in this game. One guy who does have a good matchup for the Lions is Golden Tate. The best matchup out of the Detroit wide receivers, going against Kenny Vaccaro in the slot. So that's a good spot for him. One word on Mark Ingram. Right now in the prop markets, 49.5 is the over-under for the rushing total. We are significantly on the over. So it looks like there's some pretty good value there.
Okay, let's keep on moving here. Let's go to the Green Bay Packers. So obviously Aaron Jones, the guy that got the start, great first game. Ty Montgomery is in.
Yeah, so with this Green Bay backfield, really didn't know until today for sure that Ty Montgomery was even going to be out there. It was good to see him at least practice fully this week, but he has a big flak jacket on. Like, they're really being sure to protect those multiple fractured ribs he got. And, with their week 7 bye coming up, we're fully expecting them to be splitting carries. Ty Mont's going to be the starter in all likelihood, but those 90% of snaps he was seeing prior to his injury likely won't be coming back with the kind of emergence of Jones that we saw last week, and especially this week where his injury is kind of still on the forefront of things. Other situation, we were a little worried about Jordy Nelson earlier this week. He didn't play on the Packers' last drive of that Cowboys game, but he's not even on the injury report, and he's practiced all week. So you can at least take away his health concern now. His matchup against Xavier Rhodes might be a different matter. But as far as health is concerned, we got this Packers offense has everyone, including their 2 starting tackles for the first time this season. So we'll see if that can spark anything.
Yeah, Freeman, what's on this game and the running back breakdown between these two guys?
The prop right now is 50.5, and we are right around that. I definitely wouldn't go over, although I could see a reason why people would. But on Fantasy Pros, a number of the pretty sharp rankers have moved Jones down the rankings with the news that Montgomery is starting. And then, of course, there's some other interesting news on the other side of that matchup with Stephon Diggs out. Really good spot for Adam Thielen.
Yeah, what are your guys' thoughts? Yeah, Freeman, jump into that. What are your thoughts on Diggs in this matchup here against the Packers?
Yeah, so with Diggs out, Thielen is going to be, the guy, and we've seen how he's had success in that situation before. Right now, he's top 8 in our models in terms of median, ceiling, and floor projections. So he's gotten a pretty big boost. The Packers secondary is without Morgan Burnett. He's, traditionally strong safety, but lately he's been playing cover in the slot for them, and he's their best cover guy. So he's out, which means that no Burnett, no Diggs. He's going to be playing against a lot of Quentin Rollins, who is not good this year. So it's a pretty premium spot for him. I would understand why a lot of people would be looking to lock him in, even with the unfortunate quarterback situation in Case Keenum.
Yeah, any thoughts on this game? Obviously, Diggs being out is a pretty big deal. Not only
big thing with this game, I think, to note is this backfield because, we saw the Vikings play Monday night against the Bears, so this pricing came in before they could really adjust for that. And we're, DraftKings is still under this assumption that Latavius is that lead back. We saw last week that wasn't the case. McKinnon out-touched him and out-snapped him. And the really big part that we care about is his receiving workload, where Jarek is definitely that guy. So it wouldn't be too surprising. They paid Latavius pretty well in the offseason, so he's probably not going to completely go away. But out of those two backs, it's pretty clear McKinnon carries the most upside and the highest floor with that receiving workload. So. Yeah, I think Brian's connectivity is struggling a little bit. Matt, do we want to
you guys hear me now?
Okay, yeah, we're good now.
All right, cool. All right, let's keep on going here. Let's go to the Dolphins and talk about Devontae Parker being out. What are your guys' thoughts on how this is going to affect, I guess, some of the offense here, whether it's Ajayi or Landry, in this matchup as a whole?
Yeah, I can jump on that. Right now, I think what this does more than anything is make Atlanta's defense even more interesting. That big spread is an indicator of a lot of potential fantasy goodness for the defense. For Jarvis Landry, right now his prop is 69.5. And we are pretty close to that in our projections. So I don't think it does much either way. They being the Dolphins, they're going to be, for the most part, in a pass-heavy game script, because they're going to be down. They like to run the ball, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where they have the opportunity to involve Ajayi all that much just because, pretty big dogs on the road, it looks like they're going to need to throw the ball.
Ian, what are your thoughts on Landry's workload? This is a guy, we can look at his game logs here. Like, he's just getting so much work with and without Parker. One of the most targeted guy in the leagues. But we also know how just bad this offense has looked. What are your thoughts on him just being a PPR monster at his price?
Yeah, I think you said it. I think we entered the season kind of expecting Cutler to force the ball to Devontae Parker all game, and he has. But we're still seeing Landry with a career high in targets this season. You just got to realize that the targets you're getting probably aren't the highest upside ones that you could look for in tournaments. He's averaging career lows and yards per reception, yards per target, and we got Cutler back there. It's really, you don't know when that 100-yard, 2-interception game's coming. So pretty risky in this matchup, but this is a Falcons defense that we've seen be the most vulnerable up the middle. They're a pretty good overall pass defense and overall DVOA. Trufant's a really good corner, but up the middle, they're actually only 30th. So we've seen some tight end and running back success. So that might be the soft spot to attack. Whether the Dolphins have the weapons now on the outside to really make the Falcons worry about anyone else, though, is one issue. So.
Yeah, sure. You just got to think that, like, if anyone's a bet for, or not a bet, but if anyone could approach like 15 targets in a game for a GPP, Landry might be that guy. All right, let's keep on moving. Just a couple more things here. Let's go to Oakland. The news is that they've got a couple cornerbacks that are out. What's going on here, Ian?
Yeah, so their first-round pick, Garyon Conley, is still out with this shin issue, and with David Amerson dealing with a concussion, we're not positive he's going to go either. It's just a good reminder, I think, that this Raiders secondary, even when healthy, is really vulnerable sometimes. And Phillip Rivers, we saw a bad game or two out of him this season, but he still had multiple touchdowns in the overwhelming majority of his last 12 games. So a bunch of different areas to attack. Keenan Allen's locked in as his number one target, and with Mike Williams returning for his first game, outside receiver snaps might be a little bit hard to judge, but there's a lot of opportunity against the overmatched cornerback group.
Yeah, Freeman, any last thoughts on this game here?
Yeah, I mean, it's the type of situation where I don't think it impacts Keenan Allen all that much because Conley and Emerson play on the outside anyway, but it does thin out that group as a whole. And as Ian said, it's not really that good to begin with when healthy, 30th in pass DVOA. So there's a lot of optimism for that receiving group as a whole. However, as Ian said, because Mike Williams is returning, that is going to thin out the snaps that we're likely to see for Tyrell Williams and Travis Benjamin.
Right. Probably a little bit of a sneaky game, over under 48.5, but not really getting the buzz that some game like a Superdome is getting, So might be interesting GPP targets here. All right, let's talk about Bilal Powell that you had mentioned just a little bit ago, Ian. What's going on with him? And, with Forte back, Elijah McGuire getting a little bit more work. What should we expect from this New York Jets offense just as a whole? We know that it's a pretty decent matchup against the Patriots team that's not great defensively. Is there really anyone that we want to target here?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Bilal Powell's out with a calf strain. It looked like for a bit we might just get Elijah McGuire as this number one back, but Forte's at least recovered enough from his turf toe that he'll be in there. So tough to really say how that backfield's going to go. I mean, Forte at this point in his career, you'd think they would go with the younger guy, but he's still going to be involved. I just think it's worth mentioning that there were a lot of people that were high on McCown last week going against the Browns defense that, this Pat's secondary is much worse than that. We saw him have some success against the Buccaneers and Jameis last Thursday night for really the first time all season. They're without Stephon Gilmore, who, despite his ups and downs this year, is technically their number one cornerback. So, I mean, the number one cornerback's gone from the worst pass defense in the league in DVOA. I know it's not beautiful with McCown back there, but he's got Robbie Anderson, can run by some guys, and Curse. So, I mean, it's risky. I wouldn't play in these guys in cash really, but there's definitely some exploitable cornerbacks out there in a home matchup for the Jets. So.
Any thoughts there, Friedman?
Yeah, it's a type of situation, as Ian said, really going under the radar. You could see how the Pats could totally dominate this game, especially that they've had a long week to prepare for it, and the Jets have been running hot 3 straight. You wonder if this can last. But, yeah, the worst pass defense in the league so far. McCown is flying under the radar as a GPP option. Robbie Anderson has a lot of upside going against the guy who's not Stephon Gilmore. And then Austin Seferian-Jenkins is going against the pass defense that has given it up to tight ends. So there is some hidden fantasy goodness here if you wanted to go that way. Not for cash, but for GPPs, it's interesting.
All right, and let's hit on one thing that is not going to affect the Sunday slate, but just because people are probably going to want to set lineups tonight, and we're not really sure what's going on with Marcus Mariota. Ian, what's the situation? Obviously, this is the Monday night game. Great matchup here against the Colts. What's going on with Mariota? Is he leaning more one way or the other, or are we at a truly 50-50 game time decision here?
So it's once again going to be a game time decision. We're not expecting to get word on if he'll be active by tonight or not. But the reports from practice and everything have been positive. And beat writers are one of those where he's a game time decision just like last week, but he has a better chance at suiting up than last week. So definitely seems like he has a real shot. Still, I mean, we still need to at least curb our expectations on his rushing ability if he is able to suit up with that hamstring. But it's an option against this Colts secondary that, most 20 plus pass plays allowed in the league. And you just got to kind of take that chance because it is a true game time decision for him.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely keep that in mind when you're building your primetime lineups tonight for sure. We do have a primetime breakdown on the site, so check that out. All right, let's get to some questions here. I think one big question that I've heard around the industry and got some of it sent to us is how to be contrarian with the Houston Texans. We have Deshaun Chalkson, as Matthew Freedman calls him. And we have other guys that are also projected to be pretty chalky. DeAndre Hopkins could be the most owned player in the entire slate. Even guys like Will Fuller and Lamar Miller get some love. So I guess the question is how do you get access to these guys in your tournament rosters without, eating too much chalk? What are your thoughts there, Freedman?
Well, I think if you're rostering these guys, you are just necessarily going to be eating some chalk. But I like Will Fuller as the pivot to DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins obviously is the alpha on that team, but Fuller is going to have anywhere from 5 to 8 times less the ownership, which is massive. And in his 2 games back, he has 4 touchdowns. Now, granted, it hasn't been on huge target volume, but we know that he has big play potential and that now they have been looking to him in the red zone pretty routinely. So I think there is multi-touchdown, big play upside with Fuller at a great discount. So I think he's a guy that you can stack in there to get some discounts. Obviously, Ryan Griffin going against that Cleveland secondary, which just gives it up to tight ends. He's not going to have super high ownership. So I think he's a guy that you can throw in there and that will help differentiate the stacks even more.
Yeah, any thoughts on Ryan Griffin and just sort of how to be a little more contrarian with this?
Yeah, I think Matt hit on most of the points. One thing I would note with Will Fuller, too, is he's getting that ideal matchup against Jamar Taylor. Yes. I mean, he's definitely the worst cornerback in that secondary. And, yeah, I mean, we like to target tight ends against the Browns and Giants, and that's Ryan Griffin this week. He's been playing over 80% of the snaps for them with C.J. Fiedorowicz, with him out for the last few weeks. So, yeah, Ryan Griffin, good spot, high-scoring game against a Browns defense that has been much worse against the pass and the run as well. So definitely think there's more upside in that passing game.
Yeah, agreed. I like Ryan Griffin quite a bit. Another question that we're getting here, let's go to this New England Patriots team. And this is sort of like a question about both Tom Brady and Drew Brees, Matt, is a lot of questions are like these guys that spread the ball out so much. Tom Brady and Drew Brees don't target the same guy over and over again. They spread it out. We saw, multiple touchdowns to Chris Hogan last week. Gronk always gets involved. And then on Brees' side, it's usually a lot of guys. So I guess the question is how to use them in tournaments. Do you just sort of take some stands on some guys? And if so, who are guys that you're looking at, or like full game stack? What are your thoughts on just these guys that spread it out, don't have like a number one receiver like DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, I think it's fine to spread it out a little bit and to take some stands on guys. But I think going with Gronk, he has the most touchdown equity out of those guys. Hogan has been running hot, so I think he could have some inflated ownership as a result of that. One thing we might want to track is Morris Claiborne and whether he's going to end up shadowing some of these guys or not. Ian has a piece, wide receiver cornerback breakdown, maybe check that out. But yeah, I think it's fine to take a stand on some of the guys. I would lean heavier towards Gronk, and then I would also lean a little bit towards Amendola, who does have like some multiple touchdown games. They do like to use him some on those short little routes near the end zone. And people never think of him as a guy who has upside, but he's basically playing the Julian Edelman role, but no one values him that way. So he's a guy I would look to in New England to try to get a little edge on the ownership percentages.
Yeah, that's always the difficulty. And, Adam Levitan had mentioned this earlier in some of the things he was doing on our pod and stuff, that some people are actually like less likely to roster Brady and Brees than they should just because they don't know who to stack with. So they just get like overwhelmed with if I can't figure out to stack anyone with, then I'd rather just go with a Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, because yes, I know that's a correlation play. Whereas Brady is just overwhelming because there's so many guys that can get the touchdowns. Any last thoughts there, Ian? We see this with Brees too. It's, whether it's Michael Thomas or whether you want to even pair him with Ingram or Kamara, there's just so many guys that's a little overwhelming in GPPs.
Oh, yeah. So many options. I think it's just important to try to remember the role that each of these guys kind of are at least have been serving with the Patriots. I mean, Hogan's got the second most targets inside the 10-yard line this season. He's been getting fed in the red zone, and we know Cooks is Brady's field stretcher. So, I mean, on a game-to-game basis, you would like to think that Hogan's a more consistent guy with that. I think the one guy that people are kind of forgetting about is Mike Gillislee. He obviously he doesn't have the pass game floor that we like to see from running backs, but you know, he's still locked in as that goal line back. No Burkhead again, so we don't have to worry about that. And we just haven't seen him score a touchdown since week 2 because they haven't had just as many goal-to-go opportunities. But he's still locked into that same role that we saw Blunt just go off again and again last year. So if we can get a little slightly lower ownership this week with still a high total, and he's just as good as an option as he has been.
What are our thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers, guys? We know they're splits away, but we also know that Antonio Brown against Mitchell is maybe a situation we want to target here. Freeman, what are your thoughts, leading up to here? We have some projected ownership. Like, these guys are all really low compared to some of these other, like, chalky guys like DeAndre Hopkins and some of, like, the Superdome guys. So the more it gets closer, it seems like some of these guys at their high prices are turning into pretty nice GPP pivots. What are your thoughts on the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, we know they're splits. Brown does have a really nice matchup against Terrence Mitchell. He's probably not going to run the majority of his routes against Marcus Peters, who they just tend to play on one side. Bell, I think, is the real guy who's undervalued here because he doesn't have road home splits. They use him basically wherever, and he's getting the volume. He's actually getting some pretty good volume inside the 10-yard line too, which hasn't traditionally been the case. So he just hasn't had, like, with the exception of his one big game a couple of weeks ago, he hasn't had a great season, but he's getting the volume, he's getting the snaps. There's a lot to like about him. So I think if there's one person in this game that you're going to go to for the Steelers, it's probably him. But there's obviously a case to be made for Bell too. Everyone on that side of the ball is going to be discounted in terms of ownership.
Yeah, Ian, I believe it was you that tweeted about this earlier, just about, like, the Kansas City Chiefs were giving up a lot of production to wide receiver ones, and then they get Antonio Brown at lower ownership. Seems like not a bad spot here.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Peters is an awesome corner, but he doesn't move from the left side of the field. So whenever they want Antonio Brown to get matched up on Terrence Mitchell, who statistically is like one of 4 corners to give up 3 or more touchdowns this year, they're going to be able to get that matchup. And we've seen other teams been able to get that all season. And he does have bad home away splits, but I just think it's important when we're looking at players' splits to kind of keep the whole perspective in mind, because Ben Roethlisberger, when he goes from home to away, he goes from a top quarterback to a bottom cornerback. When Antonio Brown goes from home to away, he goes from the number 1 wide receiver in DraftKings points per game to number 2 receiver in DraftKings points per game. So he's still balling out on the road. It's just not the usual 30 points per game we see at home. So in a matchup where he won't be seeing the guy I think a lot of people are afraid of, there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, it's not like he's, like, incapable of a 90-yard touchdown in Arrowhead. I mean, it's like the dude's still Antonio Brown. So, all right, we're going to end it there. Thank you guys for joining. Sorry about my internet issues at the beginning. I think we got it right and rolling. So, thanks for joining. Good luck this week. Talk to you guys next week.